The EU referendum, I'm voting to remain, and this is why I think you should vote to remain as well. I actually genuinely contemplated supporting Brexit from a left-wing perspective. So I'm not some pro-EU ideologue. Like millions of Britons, I won't be marching to the polling station to vote remain because I think the EU in its current form is, 2 thumbs up. I'll be thinking to myself, actually, the alternative is a lot worse and the European Union can change. So here's my reasons for why I'm voting for remain in the European Union referendum. Number 1, workers' rights. Are you a fan of paid annual leave? Do you think part-time workers should have basic rights? What about health and safety regulations of the workplace? All of these are protected as part of our membership of the European Union. Do you think the Conservative government, probably led by Boris Johnson, that's right, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, do you think that they will protect or reinstate those workers' rights which we currently enjoy as part of our membership of the European Union? I don't think so. If all European Union member states have basic rights that all workers are entitled to, then you don't have a situation of a race to the bottom with countries competing over stripping workers of their rights. Do I think the EU record on workers' rights is perfect? Far from it. But what I want is to actually increase those rights across the European Union, to improve the basic rights, terms and conditions that all workers across the continent have. But if we leave the European Union, then the situation for workers in this country, where we already lack many rights that I think workers should have, well, the situation is going to get so much worse. Number 2, European-wide action on tax justice and climate change. We had the Panama Papers revelations just a few weeks ago, and what that underscored was that we have a rich global elite who are hiding their wealth from the tax authorities, whilst at the same time there are these huge cuts being implemented which are damaging the lives of people all over the world.
No government, no Prime Minister has done more to make sure we crack down on tax evasion, on aggressive tax avoidance.
Our own government has a terrible record on tax avoidance. But after the Panama Papers revelations, which understandably caused huge anger across Europe, EU finance ministers were forced to come together to start talking about action to put into practice. Now, are they going far enough? No, we need to build pressure on them. But the fact is, it's only through having lots of countries working together as part of the European Union that we're best able to deal with tax avoidance and ensure that tens of billions of pounds of avoided tax actually end up in the national exchequers across the European Union to actually invest in services and jobs. The same goes with climate change. Now, people often switch off with climate change and go, oh, it's so boring, and it seems long-term and abstract and too technical, but it's a genuine existential threat to our species. And again, you need international coordinated action to deal with the menace of climate change. EU leaders came together and committed to cutting greenhouse emissions by 40% by 2030. Do we need to hold them to it? Yes. But again, it shows that if you have EU-wide action, then we can actually tackle issues which can't be dealt with one national government at a time. 3, we can change the European Union. I am what you could call a left-wing Eurosceptic. I'm somebody who is opposed to the lack of accountability and democracy in EU institutions, and I want to change that. One of the main reasons some on the left have spoken about wanting to leave the European Union is the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, so-called TTIP. But TTIP at the moment is lying in rubble. Because what happened is this: people all over the European Union, including big demonstrations at the very heart of the European Union in Germany, movements, political parties, citizens lobbying their members of the European Parliament, they have forced the people behind TTIP into dramatic retreat. And now the French government is saying that as things stand, it can't support TTIP. And if just one national government says that, then it's in a real mess. What does that show? That actually, if we unite together, we can change the European Union. And if we leave, what do you think the Conservatives will do? They'll try and negotiate a load of transatlantic trade investment partnerships with countries all over the world, threatening our national sovereignty and our democracy. Now, people often say to me, yeah, Owen, what about Greece? You know, Greece is a country which has been decimated by cuts imposed upon it by EU leaders. I've been to Greece, and do you know what? In Greece, overwhelmingly, people support membership of the European Union. If people are saying Britain should leave the European Union in solidarity with the Greek people, they're actually doing the opposite of what the Greek people want, because the vast majority of Greeks want A, to stay in the European Union, and B, to change it. I want to stand in solidarity with those people. Yanis Varoufakis, he's seen the European Union up close, he's seen some of its ugliest features, and he is arguing that we need to stay within the European Union in order to change it. And he set up something called the Democracy in Europe movement. I can look at countries like Spain, where the anti-austerity party Podemos are on the rise. There are movements all over the European Union now that want to change it and force democracy and accountability and transparency on it. I want to support all of those movements and parties. I want to stand with them. And I'm not going to stand with them if I argue for Britain to leave the European Union. Reason number 4. The Leave campaign is a disgusting, rabid, reactionary, xenophobic campaign. Firstly, the sheer cynicism, the shamelessness, the audacity of the Leave campaign, full of people now arguing that EU membership threatens our National Health Service. Now, I'll tell you the biggest threats to the National Health Service is the people actually in the Leave campaign. Some of these people are bitterly, ideologically opposed to our National Health Service being a publicly run service. They support its privatisation. So how dare they now try and tap into people's fears about the future of the NHS, something they have absolutely no concern for whatsoever. And frankly, the whole basis of the campaign, the Leave campaign now, because they've abandoned the economic argument, is all about immigrants and foreigners. They drew up this list of EU citizens who raped and murdered people in Britain. Now, obviously, rape and murder are disgusting crimes, and I'm afraid they're committed by people from all sorts of backgrounds. It is so unbelievably disgraceful to try and basically portray the EU as a source of a bunch of foreign murderers and rapists who are going to come over here and kill and rape people. Similarly now, they're going on about Turkey joining the European Union. By the way, we can veto that and it would be vetoed. But what they're arguing is Turkey is full of crime and Turkish criminals will come over to Britain and swamp us. They're playing into some of the worst, most base prejudices that people have. And then they have the cheek, the audacity to say it's those arguing to stay within the European Union who are waging a campaign of fear. Now, I have no truck with the official Remain campaign. I oppose all scaremongering and fear and all the rest of it. But these people are trying to tap into people's fears about foreigners and immigrants. And the reality is, if Britain votes to leave the European Union, it will be seen above all else as a vote against foreigners and immigrants. Is that really the sort of country we want to be? How would we look each other in the face the next day? It would be an ugly, dangerous moment in our history.
You did that. Against the European Union. You wanted to rub our noses in diversity, didn't you, Mr. Lord Mandelson?
5. The real threat to great British institutions doesn't come from Brussels, it comes from our own government. Take 2 of the proudest national institutions in this country, the NHS and the BBC. The NHS is suffering the longest squeeze in funding since the 1940s. The government is forcing through policies of privatisation and marketisation. It's waging war against our junior doctors. It's because of cuts to local care budgets by local authorities, because of cuts by the national government to local authorities, that's putting huge pressure on an NHS which is already suffering. These are attacks that are coming from here, from our government, not from Brussels. The same thing with the BBC. It's clear what John Whittingdale, our culture secretary, who clearly has no truck for the BBC whatsoever, the Tories hate, again, an institution which is all about public service rather than profit, and their policies undermining the BBC. So if there are threats to Britishness, to British traditions and British values, those threats are not coming from Brussels, they're coming principally from our own government. 6. I fear the consequences not just for Britain, but all over Europe. Europe faces so many crises at the moment. My fear is, if Britain leaves, that will set a precedent and could start a domino effect. The whole European Union itself could begin to crumble.
No more refugees! No more refugees!
The radical right in Europe are the most powerful now at any time since the 1940s.
We are not European, we are British!
And my fear is, if we end up with Britain leaving the European Union, principally because of immigration and hostility to immigrants and foreigners, then that will be seen as a huge vindication for similar sentiments across Europe. It will embolden radical right, far right parties and could set in chain the disintegration of the European Union. So I'd urge people to think this through very carefully indeed. If we leave the European Union, that is it. We've left, we've gone, there's no turning back. And I think, far from laying the foundations for building a better country, running the interests of working people, it will just lead to a Britain which is both ever more hostile to people from different countries and also right-wing economics and politics. So let's build a different Europe, uniting with people all over Europe who want to change it, make it more democratic and more accountable and more transparent. Voting Remain should be the beginning of us fighting to build that Europe together. So I want to hear what you think. I'm sure this will have people on lots of different sides of the fence, but this is such an important issue, even though I know you're probably all as sick of this campaign as I am. So leave your comments and thoughts, get your friends involved, good to hear what other people think, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.